Hello! In today's video, I'm going to be giving you some tips on how to gain power for the Great Heights event that's coming up in Call of Dragons without spending any speed-ups. The Great Heights event was just announced in the 1.0.30 patch notes, which you can see right here, 0.6 Great Heights. So it's time to prepare. In this video, I'll be showing you a spreadsheet that will include all the different groupings or presumed groupings for the Great Heights event, so you can look at that to see what servers your server will likely be paired with, and you can also take a look at that spreadsheet to see when the event likely will be starting, and that should tell you when you should most likely start timing some of these things like your researches and your training queues. As always, there will be chapters on this video for you to skip around to whatever you find most interesting, and if you do get value from this video, do me the favor of liking it. Thank you very much. Let's start by going into the spreadsheet first, and I will meet you there. First, what we are going to go ahead and look at is some of the previous greatest heights. So these are screenshots from the 4 previous greatest heights. For some reason, I didn't have a screenshot of the one that was around March 28th, 2024, so I had to get Barracuda's screenshot of that. But here you can see that the first greatest heights was around October 4th, and then December 23rd, March 28th, and June 29th. So 83-day gap here, 92, 93. We'll assume a 93-day gap here, which would land us on September 27th, being the end of that greatest heights. Something roughly around there. So we can assume the start of this greatest heights will be around September 22nd to 24th. It might be slightly earlier, it might be slightly later, but this is a rough guess because we haven't gotten exact dates from the developers yet. I also didn't keep perfect accounting of when these things started. This is just taking a look at a screenshot, so I'm not sure if these dates are the date the screenshot was taken or the date the event started or whatnot. But for a rough estimate, let's just call it aim for September 24th with your reserves and your research. And just as a reminder, I will be giving you tips on how to gain power without using speedups for building, research, and training. But we're going to go ahead and take a look at the groupings for this Great Heights event first. And here you can see the presumed 90 groupings. As you can tell, it's just in order of server number. So server 1 through 8, 9 through 16, etc. I'm over here in Kingdom 110, so I should be matched up with 105 through 112. And I'm not sure about this grouping here. Currently server 482 is the youngest server available, so we'll see if any of these kingdoms actually get a Greatest Heights event or not. Same with these kingdoms if they're released beforehand. I'm not sure how exactly super young kingdoms are handled with their Greatest Heights. Maybe you have to be in Season 2 or something. But I believe a server that was 20 days old or something had a Greatest Heights last time. So we'll have to see how exactly that works. So if you would like to pause the video, here is the list if you want to see where your server is on here. I will put a link to this spreadsheet down in the video description. But now let's go ahead and hop back into the game, and first I will show you the building and research methods for gaining power. And then after that, I will show you the training method, which is slightly more complicated. Let's go do that. Gaining power through building is pretty self-explanatory. What you're going to want to do is just save up some building upgrades ahead of time. So normally this would be your mana refineries, or this would be your hospitals, because these give a very high amount of power per amount of speed ups spent. So as you can see here, if I spend 2 days of speed ups on my mana refinery going to level 24, I get 158,000 power. So using that in combination with even just passive troop training, that will very easily grant you 1 million power, which is what you need in order to get these 6 gold heads. That is what your goal should be for every single player in the game. Even if you're a free-to-play player in the first season, if you plan ahead, you can gain 1 million power in this event. It might be slightly difficult if you just finished the Royal Rankings event as a free-to-play player, but I still believe it's possible. I might be slightly wrong on that, and it might not be, but if it isn't, then hey, just get 200,000 power gained for 1 gold head, and prepare for the next Greatest Heights, which Greatest Heights do happen every 3 months and 3 days, because the Greatest Heights last for 3 days, and there are 3 months in between each one. So now, let's go ahead and talk about research. If we're assuming that the Great Heights event will start on September 24th, that means it will start in 2 weeks from now. So if you have any researches that will take roughly 14 days after helps, go ahead and start some of those now. So for example, I recently started Sharp Points to level 9, which I think was a 24-day upgrade or something. So I'll have to use 5 days of speed ups on this, but then I'll finish. And then a really long time ago, When the previous Great Heights ended, I started Defensive Formations 2 to level 10, and this will end roughly when the Great Heights event starts. So I'll probably have to use a couple of days of speed ups on this, but not too bad. And another thing that you can do if you are not wanting to time upgrades is that you can do the economic tech upgrades in order to gain a lot of power for very little speed up spent relative to some other things. Obviously, this is still more speed ups than your mana refineries or your hospitals, but it's more power per speed up used than troop training or things like that. So this is another option if you're not planning ahead and you're just like, hey, I'm going to use a few speed ups, blast at 1,000,000 power. Economic tech is a great way to do it if you still have that. By the way, if you need a calculator for your research, there will be a link to a calculator spreadsheet in the description that was made by Paradise/Felix, and I'm not sure which name he prefers going by, but that is a very handy calculator to use, which I personally have been using for like a year. So now let's start talking about troop training. As some of you may have noticed, and one person definitely did, I do have 26,000 tier 1 units trained and almost 26,000 tier 2 knights trained. The reason for this is that when you go ahead into your buildings for upgrading your units and you select the upgrade function, instead of doing 1,600 at a time, you're able to do 16,000 at a time without using a reserve. If you tack a reserve onto this as well, just a 10,000 one, you're able to do 26,000 troops at a time. And just a single training building of 26,000 troops will give you 78,000 power, without using any speed ups during the event specifically. So now that I've explained why I had tier 1 units, let's go ahead and look at a spreadsheet that shows us what power gain we could expect to get from doing different types of training with different types of reserves. Let's hop over to that. So here's the spreadsheet that lists every single type of training that you could possibly do, along with every single amount of troops that you could possibly do for each type. And then it shows you how much power you could expect to gain from each thing. So here it says that you would gain 332,000 power for using 10,000 troop expansions on training tier 4s from tier 1 to tier 4, and then tier 5s from tier 1 to T5. And then here on the right side you can see the 5 times raw T4, which would be 11,600 for the 10k expansions, and 21,600 for the 20k expansions, which is significantly lower than not training tier 1 units. You would basically gain 100,000 less power if you don't use tier 1 units that you upgrade to tier 4, and instead only do raw reserves of 11,600 troops. And then this factor is multiplied if you were to instead do raw T5 instead of upgrading tier 1 to T5 units, and you would gain roughly 450,000 less power. So it seems pretty worth it to actually train these tier 1 units ahead of time, and then time upgrading them for events. Now let's take a look at the next spreadsheet. This is the time required spreadsheet, and as you can see, I have several different buffs listed that you could possibly have, along with no VIP 14 or VIP 14. If your VIP level is below level 10, so 9 or lower, you won't be able to use this sheet. However, you can use it as a reference and add a few hours to the times listed. No VIP 14 refers to VIP level 10, 11, 12, and 13. Then you have the individual buffs for only having a 10% rune, having a 10% rune and a 10% title, having a 10% rune and a 10% buff, and then having a 10% rune, 10% title, and 10% buff all at the same time. So as you can see, the times are duplicated here for the with title and with buff since they give you the same amount. However, I felt this would be worth including just to avoid confusion. One thing that I do not have listed on this sheet is upgrading tier 2 to T4, or T2 to T5, or T3 to T5 for your Celestials or your Cavalry, and the reason that I don't have that is that would just make this sheet unnecessarily complicated. Plus, most people don't really need that information. You can just do a guesstimate, and you can even train these troops slightly later, and then just use a few training speedups during the event. There's no real issue with that. One important note before we go ahead and wrap up this portion is to note that these times are slightly off. It's roughly an hour and 30 minutes faster in game than the times that are displayed on this sheet per 10 days of queue. So for example, this 10 day, 17 hour, and 46 minute one is more like 10 days, 16 hours, and 16 minutes. Something like that. Well, I guess probably 10 days, 16 hours, and like 6 minutes. But it's pretty accurate. So you can definitely still use this as something to help you plan ahead. And at the bottom of the spreadsheet, I have the different methods that you could use to gain power with your 5 different training buildings, along with the highlighted options being the things that I would suggest for you to do that would cause the least possible amount of headaches. So personally, in my opinion, training 11,600 raw T4 flying units and cavalry and 26,000 tier 1 T4 infantry archers and mages would be your best option, and that would gain you 326,800 power without spending any speed ups. And then similarly for T5 players, doing 11,600 raw T5 flying or cavalry and 26,000 tier 1 to T5 infantry archers and mages would gain you 934,000 power, again without using any speed ups. One thing you may notice is that 20,000 expansions are not on this spreadsheet, and the reasoning for that is that I don't really think spending gems on that is worth it. However, in a future video that I will release substantially further before the next Greatest Heights event, I will add that to this, and that will probably be something like, 30 days of speed ups for this, and then we will also have the 21,600 raw T5 and the 21,600 raw T4 as well. So if you would like to see that video and get a notification for that when it goes live, so that you remember to actually train these troops to gain a bunch of power without using any speed ups during the event, go ahead and subscribe, and I guess put on notifications so you actually see it. That'd be pretty cool. I hope that you are also looking forward to the Great Heights event, because I know that I am. This event is a great event for free-to-play and low-spend players that allows them to push 1 million power, which is relatively easy if you plan ahead of time, and in exchange you get 6 gold heads which you can use to progress your account. I'm looking forward to getting these gold heads. I might spend them on my Bertrand to unlock a couple of more skills, and since he's almost awakened, or I'll most likely actually just save him for Generation 3 mages, which are only a season and a half away. But that's mid-2025, but hey, you gotta look forward to something, right? Anyways, thank you for watching this video. Personally, I believe that this video does hold value for more than just you that are watching it, so if you would like to share this video with other people who may need help, especially people that are free to play or low spend, for planning ahead for this Great Heights event in order to actually gain that 1 million power, please go ahead and share this video with them. That way they get some advice that will help them a lot. Anyways, thank you for watching, and have a great rest of your day.